So for the benefit of those who are on the call right now and those who are going to be seeing this in the recorded version, I just want to introduce myself. My name is Guidy Mamann, and I'm the senior partner at Mamann, Sandaluk and Kingwell. We're an immigration law firm. As you know, COVID has had a tremendous impact on the processing of all kinds of immigration matters, and it's created some challenges for various categories of immigration to Canada. So we thought it'd be a good idea to try to bring the public up to date, either live or on a recorded Zoom call with announcements. Right now, we're in the middle of the summer. The fall is right around the corner, and people who are planning on coming to Canada to study or returning to Canada to study, or who are in Canada continuing to study, or who are involved in the postgraduate employment, they're going to need some updates. Immigration Minister Mendocino on July the 14th, which is just last week, made some announcements, and we want to make sure that the public has any additional information that they might need. So we're joined today by Durriya Bharmal and Sandra Peters. Both are registered immigration consultants who've been in the employ of Mamann, Sandaluk and Kingwell. Durriya heads up our personal team. She has been licensed, she's been with our firm for 19 years and has been doing immigration work for at least 31 years. Sandra Peters specializes in students and student placement. She's been with our firm for 4 years, and she's also a licensed immigration consultant. So without further ado, I think, Durriya, you're going to go first. I think you're going to be covering the overseas portion in short. We're going to have about a 5 or 6 minute presentation from each one. And after you're done, Durriya, just hit the highlights. And then Sandra will talk about the in-Canada situation, dealing with the study permits here, renewals, extensions, etc., and any issues dealing with the post-grad work permit. So let's get started. Durriya, maybe take 5 minutes and hit the highlights of your presentation. And then, of course, we're going to have questions. If you have questions, just use the chat feature, and we'll be happy to entertain them. Durriya?
Thank you, Guidy. Thank you, everyone, for joining. And I'll get straight to my highlights. And again, just to brief, please go ahead and send us your questions on the chat group, and we will try and answer all of them for you. So I will mainly deal with applications outside of Canada for students who have applied, and these applications could have been pending since about February, March, when applications started going in for the fall semester 2020. And a lot of you have faced situations where you're not hearing anything, you're not sure whether you're actually going to end up here in September or not. So IRCC, short for Immigration, Refugee, Citizenship Canada, have reduced staffing. They've every office everywhere in the world has reduced staffing. The processing times for study permits have drastically increased across the network. A lot of information that they needed, things like biometrics, medicals, submission of original travel documents, students are not, or applicants are not able to do on time, and it's just chaos. So just for information purposes, so the applications are being processed. They have not shut the system down. You will be hearing from them. And as Guidy just mentioned, last week, the Immigration Minister in Canada did make some special announcements for students. And what they did is they have decided to introduce a two-step application approval process. What this means is that for any application that is meeting eligibility, so eligibility would mean you have got a letter of acceptance, you have the funds, your application is complete in most ways, and an officer feels that you would be granted the study permit, you will be sent what's called an approval in principle. It'll be a letter saying that, you know, you have been approved, you can begin studying, and as of the date of the letter or the day before will be your allowance date to begin your studies. Now your studies would, you can begin your studies wherever you are, online, if that is what your educational institution that you're coming to study is offering. And the minister has said that if you do begin online studying overseas, and obviously you're going to have to provide proof of that in the future, and down the road, if you're coming to Canada and you intend to pursue the Canada's postgraduate work permit, we will touch on that a little bit later, Sandra will. Then the time that you have begun studying outside of Canada online will be counted towards the time required in Canada for studying and for the postgraduate work permit. So that is great. And what the minister also did announce that they will be expediting every application that's pending for the fall semester. And you should be hearing from on your applications pretty often. Just a word of caution for those people who have used the online process to apply for your study permits. We have come across some technical difficulties with the government, and we're seeing that notifications are posted on your online portal, which you normally won't get. I mean, normally you would, but you may not get a notification on your email. So, you know, a word of advice, you know, keep on top of your portal, log in, check any status updates, because, you know, your email notification may not appear. Persons who have had an approval of our study permit prior to March 18, 2020 can travel to Canada. So these are the approvals that I'm talking about that I just explained to you, where you know there's a huge backlog. Those are applications where you have not heard on until now. But if you have an application that was approved prior to March 18, 2020, you should, if you are able to send your travel documents or your passports in for issuance of a study permit, or the letter confirming that you have been approved, you should be able to travel to Canada. There are some mandatory quarantine procedures and so forth in place. But you should be able to travel to Canada and begin your studies. You will have to obviously prove to the border officers that your DLI, your designated learning institution, is still going to be offering this course. You may need to get a letter from your college just to show the border officers. It's not mandatory that your classes are going to continue as planned. So that is really the most important thing for persons overseas. For those who received some kind of information or request for documentation, for example, biometrics or medicals on their application, the government has confirmed that they will not deny or refuse applications that are non-compliant, meaning that you have not been able to do your biometrics or medicals or give them whatever they need. They will keep on bringing forward the application. You will be, if you were given 30 days on your letter, that automatically turned to 90 days. Officers will send you reminders at the end of 90 days to give you another 90 days, and they will keep on bringing forward your application until they have received your document. In terms of the announcement that was made last week by the minister also did confirm that, you know, the letters of the approval in principle that they will issue to students overseas allows you to start studying outside of Canada. You are not permitted to travel into Canada with that approval in principle until you receive a final approval. So your letters will explain to you what you can and what you cannot do. and whether you can actually now travel to Canada or not. There are travel bans in place for persons who are coming to Canada. I'm not going to get into a lot of detail. We have got a very, very detailed document prepared for all of you out there. It's going to give you the details, the information that we are giving you in brief today. And if anyone wants access to that document, please just put your email address or let us know in the chat, and we will forward you an email with that information. So you will have a lot more detail and a lot more clarification on what we're giving you today.
Durriya, we've put up the link on the group chat. I hope that everybody can see the Zoom group chat. And the link is there. You feel free to circulate it. It's now a public document. If you know anybody who needs this information in written form, it's there. Okay? All right. Thank you very much. Go ahead, Durriya.
That's about it for me. Just a quick word of caution. I know people are having difficulties with obtaining the letter of acceptance from their educational institution here. Again, the DLIs or the designated learning institutions are having internal delays in issuing these. You cannot apply for a study permit outside of Canada without a letter of acceptance. They have made an exemption for inland extensions for the letter of acceptance that Sandra will be touching on, but that is another important note for you. That really should cover briefly what I had to say. Can I pass this over to you, Sandra, to take over on inland? Once again, please post your questions on, or whatever questions you have on study permits and COVID, and we will be happy to address them as soon as possible.
Thanks so much, Durriya. Thanks so much. Sandra?
Thanks, Durriya and Guidy. So Durriya just covered overseas study permits, and I'm just going to talk a little bit about in-Canada applicants for study permits. Generally, people who are in Canada do not qualify to apply for a study permit. You're expected to apply overseas. We're getting a lot of people right now who are on visitor status in Canada and who are barred from traveling who would like to change their status over to students. But that's only possible under certain situations. So I'm just going to sort of briefly go over those. I'm just reading a list essentially of that comes from the CIC web or the IRCC website, and that is again listed in that document that we're circulating. So basically the only times you can apply for a study permit within Canada are if you are already in valid status as a worker or a student, if you have a spouse or common law partner or a parent who has a valid study permit or work permit, if you're a minor who's in primary or secondary school, or an exchange student or visiting student. The one thing that some people sort of, this is the area where more people would qualify than less, would be if you completed a short-term course or a study program that's essentially a prerequisite for a longer course. So therefore you'd be able to apply within Canada. If you already have a PR, permanent residence application in process, that's a sponsorship, you could also apply within Canada, or if you're subject to an unenforceable removal order. There's a couple more that are on that document, but those are the sort of main ones. So because a lot of people are in Canada and subject to a travel ban, I'm just going to talk a little bit about applying from within Canada. So you would have to apply as if you were out of the country. So you'd apply as an overseas student. In the past, sometimes what you could do, not all the time, was that you could leave Canada to go to the US, assuming you had a valid visa or you were exempt, and sort of finalize your document that way, or if you were called to an interview or something like that. Obviously, right now the border's closed, so that's not an option. So if you were to decide to apply for an in-Canada study permit, you should be aware that you may have to return to your home country to get that finalized and processed. So
they're not allowing flag polling or an exemption to the flag polling, are they, Sandra?
No, there's no exemption for that. No.
Okay.
So yeah, flag polling meaning you just leave the country, you go to an office just outside of Canada, and then you come back, or sorry, you come back into Canada, and therefore you've re-entered the country and you can process it. But that's not something that you could do right now because of the border closures.
To interrupt Sandra, sorry.
Sure.
Just to clarify a little about what Sandra said, you will have to exit Canada, and you may not necessarily be able to go to the United States, but you can go anywhere else. You don't have to go to your home country and then return. But what Sandra is trying to explain is that you will have to exit and re-enter Canada, and not necessarily from the US.
Right, exactly. Thanks, Durriya. I think I sort of covered that. If you are applying from within Canada, like Durriya said, you're still going to need a letter of acceptance. And that letter of acceptance, if 150, so there's a sort of clause there that if your application has been processing for less than 150 days and from the start date listed on your letter of acceptance, they're going to request a new one. And I've actually had clients where that letter has been requested prior to 150 days. So you should just keep that in the back of your mind. You may have to contact your school to get an updated letter of acceptance because processing times are a bit longer right now. And then similar to what Durriya was saying, the biometrics, the medical exams, and the original travel documents, if these are requested from you, you will be given 90 days with extensions as necessary, because they recognize that the biometrics offices are closed, and so are a lot of panel physician offices. So those will be given extensions. Online learning is similar again to what Durriya was saying. They will allow you to do the online learning and still use that time to qualify you for a postgrad work permit. And I think that's all I really had to say about the in Canada study permits applications. So if you're doing an extension here for your study permit, there are a few different guidelines that have changed under COVID. So basically, again, there's going to be delays in getting those processed, but as long as you submit your application before your status expires, then you'll be in implied status, you'll be in valid status until a decision's rendered. And the other sort of key thing is that if they request a letter of acceptance or proof of enrollment and you can't get that, that's not going to be a bar for them to refuse, or that's not going to allow, they won't refuse your application, I guess is what I'm trying to say. Instead, what you'll have to do with your application is just submit a little explanation as to why you can't get that. And generally the reason is going to be because your school is closed and you can't be issued that document. So the last thing just to briefly touch on here are postgrad work permits. So for anyone who's interested in getting a postgrad work permit, the IRCC is waiving the requirement to submit a letter of completion or final transcripts with your application. You will, again, have to submit a letter of explanation that details why you can't submit those documents. If you've had to go down to part-time status instead of full-time status, your eligibility for a postgrad work permit won't be affected by that. And distance learning, we just discussed that that'll also count towards your eligibility for a postgrad work permit, as long as it's less than 50% of your program of study is completed in Canada. I think that was sort of the gist of the changes to the postgrad work permit. And that just the one other thing, for those who are interested in, sort of path to permanent residence and want to apply for the Canadian Experience class in the future, as long that all of these things that we just discussed for the postgrad work permit will also qualify you for that 1 year that you'll need to apply for the Canadian Experience class. So that was sort of all I had to say. Durriya, do you have anything to add to that, or Guidy?
I really do, yes. This is another announcement that was made last week, and this is for persons who are inside Canada who wish to restore their status. So if you were in Canada and you lost your status and you're aware that you had 90 days within which to apply for a restoration of that, an announcement was made for temporary residents last week that the minister has kind of taken off that 90-day deadline for restorations for temporary residents. And if your status in Canada expired after January 30th to 2020, you have until December 31st, 2020 to restore your status. So, you could be a worker, a student, a visitor. And if you've passed the 90-day deadline, the minister has allowed for up to December 31st you can still file a restoration even if your status expired in January. So just another brief update there for temporary residents.
Just for the benefit of those who are in that situation, I would highly recommend that just because that has been extended doesn't mean you should not apply in a timely way for an extension, because the test for an extension is very different than the test for restoration. A restoration is a lot more difficult to get than an extension. So don't wait for your status to expire and try to save a few dollars on the extension by dealing with it in the restoration period. That would be, I think, a terrible mistake. I have a couple of questions that I want to ask, but I'm not going to do that now. We have a question from Chris. And Chris is saying that his study permit expired in March. He applied in January for an extension. He completed his program just this past April, and his study permit application is still pending. He went ahead and he applied for his postgraduate work permit, and now that is pending. So his question is, can I start working for any employer?
Yes, he can, because he was still in status as a student. He applied before his study permit expired, and then he applied for a post-grad work permit. So as soon as he applies for that post-grad work permit, he can start working full-time.
Yes, he does not need to wait for the post-grad work permit to be issued.
Okay, very good. But just one observation. I think it's kind of interesting that the government went to all this trouble to try to accommodate students. And those who are actually in Canada who may now want to transition from visitor status to employment to study permit status really don't have a practical solution. They can't flagpole at the US border. They can't really leave and come back because there may probably be quarantine restrictions on their side when they go home or when they go to a third country. And certainly there would be quarantine restrictions here when they get back. So it's interesting that that issue hasn't been addressed. One question that I have, I don't know if either of you can answer it, is right now there are people who may be working on a post-grad work permit. And they've been laid off recently. And, you know, can they get some sort of allowance to complete their 1 year if they're running out of time on their CEC 3-year limit to get their experience?
From my following of the COVID-19 updates and everything that's been going on, I have not seen anything like that. I have not seen any exemptions, and I believe the last IRCC meeting that they had with stakeholders, they did actually say that unfortunately you're just going to have to work that much longer in Canada to meet your 12-month requirements towards a Canadian experience.
So if their 3-year clock is almost up, a lot of these young people are not going to find jobs in Canada, maybe in the next 12-month period, let's say. And so it's easy to envision that in 6 months or a year from now, we're going to get young people coming to us and say, look, I got fired, I got laid off, and I tried like crazy to get a job in order to finish up my 1 year of post-grad work experience, and I just couldn't find a job. I'm wondering if there's going to be any allowance for that, because I have a feeling that that's going to be a huge problem for a lot of young people who kind of waited till the end to complete, the end of the 3-year period in order to get their 1 year of Canadian work experience.
Right.
Well, yeah. I guess maybe they'll come back later on and try to clean that up. Maybe it's the fact that right now they don't have to deal with that problem. They may have to deal with that problem in 6 months from now or something, and maybe the immigration department will try to deal with it at that time.
Yeah, let's hope so.
Also, not all not all people who are eligible for the post-grad work permit actually get 3 years. So some people may only be on a 1 year or 2 year
Right.
work permit
Good
and
point.
be even more vulnerable to that. Yeah.
Durriya, on the overseas side, we're right now July 23rd. Is there still time to apply for the 2021 academic year for overseas?
2020, you mean, right?
2021.
Right. 2021?
Right, for fall, for September.
Okay. See, the announcement was just made last week about, expediting all applications in process. We don't know, we haven't seen that. I don't think, Sandra, unless you want to pitch in on that, we haven't seen any outcomes yet from last week with our own cases. But if they do process them as fast as they're saying that they will give them priority processing, then it still may not be too late to file for the fall 2020 sessions that start. You just might have more difficulty getting into the fall 2020 sessions now because most of them would have been filled. But again, Sandra, you may want to just...
Yeah, so depending on the program, some of them, like Durriya said, might be full, but there's often some programs that remain open right up until the day of enrollment. But we are seeing pretty significant delays on getting decisions prior to the minister's announcement. Now that that's been altered a little bit, then we may see that things start speeding up. But if you were to apply for September 2020 and you didn't get a decision beforehand, well, they're giving you the opportunity to supply new letters of acceptance. So you could always defer until January if your program allows for that.
Right. So if we got a call today for a young person who says, look, I want to go study in Canada in September, any chance that they'll get it?
Yeah, they may. Once we see what really happens with the minister's announcements from last week, we'll be in a better position to say, this is the processing time average, and we could still process it.
I think it also depends on which country they're applying from, depending on which overseas offices, how they're affected, et cetera, et cetera.
And one interesting question I think would be, so if we have a young person outside, let's suppose they want to go to York University here in Toronto, and York is offering most courses, let's say, by way of video. I'm wondering what would be the situation if the young person, if the student overseas wanted to start taking those classes in September, starting September, because really they don't need to be in Canada to study. So do you see any barriers to that? Is the university, for example, going to have a problem admitting them into their program?
So what the government has clarified is that if your program is normally in-person, in-class program, you will need the approval in principle of the study permit before you start that course, even if you're going to start it overseas online. So you will still need that approval in principle letter. If the course is just an online course that York University is offering, which would not normally require a study permit, you don't require a study permit to start that course.
Yeah, but I'm not sure that that's consistent with the law. For example, the study permit is only necessary because you're in Canada studying, right? If there was a course, for example, a Bachelor of Arts degree that a person wants to apply at York University, right? Why can't they just start even without having applied for a study permit? They're not in Canada studying, right? So why can't they just study from overseas?
So prior to this announcement, Guidy, I do have a client who's overseas and applied with lots of time to receive a decision. He applied back in January or February and still had not received a decision prior to the start in May at a Canadian university. So he was, again, this announcement had not yet been announced. So he was left with the decision, do I start online and hope I get an approval later? Or do I just defer he had to defer for an entire year. And the risk was that he starts online, he doesn't get issued a study permit, and now he's lost that money, he's lost that time, and he won't be able to finish his program. So, but now, as Durriya says, that now that they've issued this directive, it just doesn't make any sense to take that risk because they've said that they will not sort of honor those studies without the study permit having been issued already.
Yeah, that doesn't make any sense to me.
I know.
I mean, I'm not, first of all, I would say there's two questions here, right? The general proposition, which is, does a person need to have a study permit to study in a regular program at a university while outside of Canada? I think the legal answer to that is no.
I agree.
Okay, all right. Then there's another question. If you do this, let's say remote learning, you participate in this general BA program at York University, for example, and you've done 3 or 4 months, or let's say even the first whole term in overseas, but you were registered at York University, it's remarkable to me that the government would say, no, we're not going to recognize those credits that you got between September and December because it wasn't under the authority of a study permit. I think that would be kind of silly.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it is, but that's really exactly what they've said, that we're not going to own it if you don't have a study permit. But
yeah, no, I'm not suggesting, I'm not disagreeing with you about the rule. I wouldn't do that, but I would say as a comment that doesn't sound very facilitative. I think the government's gone to tremendous trouble to accommodate people. For example, I'm surprised that they've extended restorations right till December 31st. We don't even know, honestly, COVID could disappear next week, yet they've given everybody all the way until December, which is fairly generous. But if, God forbid, you study 1 month in Canada from September to October, then you come over here, they're not going to recognize that. And actually, that raises a different question, right? The next question is, let's suppose, well, they wouldn't issue it. I was thinking, so let's suppose they got a permit in October, but they started their video classes in September. I think they'd be okay, right? What would your thoughts about that be?
from my reading, they've lost a month of studying.
Me too.
Yeah, that's crazy.
It is, yeah, I agree, but that's what they're saying.
Okay, well, frankly, I hope all three of us are wrong, right? I hope that it's a different outcome. Okay, so Sandra, Durriya, do you have any questions of one another?
No. If there's any questions out there?
Do we know, for example, someone who's applying for a post-grad work permit right now, do we have any idea how long that's going to take? Are we getting any kind of response?
No. Simply
and
don't.
These are all done online, right? These are all done online, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yes, it used to be an average of about 3 to 4 months for a post-grad work permit. But we haven't really seen any movement after COVID.
Yeah. Given it's online, you would think that there is a relatively neutral impact due to COVID, because you're not sending paper into a processing center, you're sending it to the cloud, you're sending it to the, the internet. So you would think that service line would not be so impacted, but for whatever reason, it looks like decisions are not being made on that line of business.
Yeah, quite a few lines of business under the immigration inside and outside have been affected by COVID. Processing times have just gone off the roof on all classes, all types of applications.
Right. One issue I think that would be of interest, I don't know if Durriya or Sandra, you've seen it. We published today on our official MSK social media channels the results of this morning's express entry draw for Canadian Experience class. And I think today's was what, 454, I think it was?
I'm just
was
looking
it?
right. I'm looking right now, Guidy.
Yeah, I think it's 454. And what we did is we plotted all of the CEC passing scores since January, just before the
445 actually.
445, yeah, it's even lower than
Lower, yeah.
Even lower. And you'll see from the graph at the beginning of the year in January, I think the first draw was maybe January 8th or 6th or something like that. we were up in 470 territory. And now we have plummeted down to the 440s. So a lot of young people and foreign workers who have a year of work experience who couldn't qualify before, right now appears to be the time. Now the slope is going like this. There was one blip. I think the last draw was a little bit out of the ordinary. But the
skilled worker class, right?
I'm sorry?
The last draw, you mean the federal skilled worker class draw, right?
I was referring to the CEC. I think the CEC was a spike, wasn't it? I thought I saw a spike in the CEC the last draw. And I think it was for all categories, but I could be wrong. But in any event, the point should be made for anyone who is in that position of the 440s, 450s, not to despair. It looks like this is a trend. It may continue to drop, but this is definitely the time to apply, I would think. And it doesn't hurt you anyways, because even if you're a little bit under where we are now, you could stay in the pool. It costs you nothing as long as you are not misrepresenting any of the information that you're asked to provide. So just a pointer out there for strategy purposes. Okay.
I'm wondering if anyone has any questions, and we could even open up your mic if you'd like to ask those.
Sure. If there's anybody who wants to post a question on the Zoom chat, we'll be happy to deal with it.
Hi, I do have a question.
Hi, Shrafi.
Hi. So basically, I'm a Bangladeshi international student in Canada, and I had to come to visit my parents because they both had corona, and I'm currently in Bangladesh now. So my passport expired on April 19th, and since my passport expired, my study permit expired as well. And I couldn't renew it on time because like Bangladesh embassy was not responding for COVID, I assume. So when I will plan to go back, would I have to apply from the beginning, or can I just apply for the extension, or do I have to follow all the procedure just like the first time?
You will need a new student visa from overseas, and it'll be exactly like you did the first time, because there are no extensions outside Canada. Did your study permit inside Canada, as well as your visa, the counterfoil in the passport and the passport, all of them have expired together in April, right?
Yes.
Yeah, unfortunately, you will have to apply for a new study permit. Are you in the middle of a program in Canada?
I was in the middle of the program, and in the middle, my passport expired, like my study permit expired, so I couldn't complete that either.
Yeah, so unfortunately, you will have to apply all over again, but you should be okay because you can get your transcripts and stuff of what you've studied here and a letter of acceptance for fall or the winter session, and just make a new application for a study permit once you have your new passport.
You could actually, I think, apply for your study permit without your passport right now and give them an explanation as to why you don't have it.
Yes, you can, you can attempt that, yes. Absolutely.
Just out of curiosity, Ashrafi, was there a reason, was there a barrier to you applying for an extension of your Bangladeshi passport in Canada?
It's just I was calling them and they were not responding. Then I sent them an email. I mentioned the subject as like urgent attention please, and then they still didn't respond. So I had to get a travel permit to come home. And I'm just like very afraid. I don't know what's gonna happen next.
Right. So Ashrafi, let me say that of course none of us can see into the future, okay? But based on about 33 years of experience that I've been involved in this business, the immigration system can be harsh and sometimes not necessarily rational. But we've seen situations like the tsunami and other serious crises like that, where the government did show flexibility for people who lost their documents, people who couldn't prove their identity, all kinds of situations. So I'm not, if I were in your situation, I would have anxiety no matter what, right? But moving forward, I hope that the government will be able to understand that things happen in life that are beyond your control. I mean, you're not the one who brought this COVID upon us, and you're not the one who shut down the Canadian embassy or the Bangladeshi embassy or whatever. So hopefully we don't have all the answers right now, because it's going to take people like you to come forward with problems for them to react to those problems and say, hey, we didn't think of that. Maybe we should pass another exemption or another exception to the rule. So hopefully you're not going to be too out of shape, okay? Just keep a little bit of hope, and if you have any problems, you just give us a call, okay?
Okay. Yeah, and I also have a few questions, but I think I'm gonna knock you guys privately for those.
Sure, okay. Chris is asking a question. He says, what should I show an employer to prove to them that I am on implied status? Okay, so this is not really a problem that we're seeing just through COVID. This is a problem that we see all the time. People who are not in the clients of the immigration system sometimes don't know what the heck implied status is. They just want to see a piece of paper that says, yes, this person has the right to be here or the right to work here. So Chris, the way that we deal with that is quite simple. We issue a letter to the client, and sometimes to the employer directly, saying that we are experts in the field of immigration law. This person has applied for whatever status that they applied for. We've confirmed that online with immigration, through the immigration portal. And in our opinion, this person is authorized to be in Canada, study in Canada, work in Canada, whatever it might be. And it's very rare that we get any pushback. Once in a while, we'll get somebody who will call and say, hi, they'll call our number and say, hi, is this Mr. So-and-so? Did you actually write this letter for Mr. John Doe? And we say, yes, we did. And they say, oh, okay, that's fine. So if, as long as I have this letter, we're satisfied that we can rely on that. Okay. And sometimes we also, not sometimes, but almost always, we include the actual reference to the legislation saying, provided, that the section whatever of the regulations provide the following. Okay. And Chris, if you have something like that, those letters are not particularly expensive. We issue those as a matter of routine in connection with our existing clients. So if one of our clients who we're doing a PR application or whatever is extending their status, we will issue those routinely. So that hopefully shouldn't be a challenge. Okay. All right. Anybody else? Okay. Okay. So I think we're okay. If there are no other questions, certainly we're able to entertain a couple more questions. But I think we're good right now. Durriya, can you just or Sandra, can you just talk a little bit about requirements, the statutory requirements for the WES or for medicals or for fingerprinting? What's the status on those things that, our clients have to do in cases of applications? Are they doing fingerprinting right now for police clearances? Are they doing medicals? What's going on?
So there, I can only talk about Canada, I believe,
Right.
not for, we do know panel physicians have started taking appointments for medicals.
Right.
Yes, there are fingerprinting agencies open for fingerprints. Biometrics, I don't believe Service Canada has opened. Sandra, do you know?
No.
Otherwise,
There's no Service Canada biometrics offices open.
Offices are not open yet. But the government also did announce for applications in Canada. Sandra, if you want to touch on that, I believe there was an announcement that biometrics would no longer be required for in Canada applicants, and they would continue processing the applications without biometrics for now.
They are allowing that in some cases, yeah. I believe that they're just leaving the application open It's that two-step process. So they'll give you the approval in principle, but they won't give you a final approval until the biometrics are completed.
Okay.
Or
So you continue processing the application without biometrics.
Yes.
So,
Yeah.
you know, if you're
Yeah.
stuck due to biometrics, it shouldn't be the end of the world for you.
Exactly, exactly. And I mean, I know in in Toronto specifically, and probably in most large Canadian cities, panel physicians are open. Smaller cities, it's always a little bit more difficult, but I would imagine you could probably get your medicals done fairly easily if you want to travel a little bit. But yeah, the biometrics are just, they're not proceeding for Canadian offices yet. Or overseas, actually. I haven't seen any overseas offices opened either, to tell you the truth.
Most of the VAC offices, the visa application centers, those are the ones that are responsible overseas for biometrics.
And they're closed.
Yeah, most of them are closed, yes.
So Sandra, Durriya, what is the situation? So for example, if immigration has issued someone a request for, I don't know, biometrics, passports, etc., and they're usually given a timeline for that.
Yes.
Okay.
So that is,
so now they can't comply with that timeline for obvious reasons. So what would be your recommendation? Let's suppose the person is applying on their own.
yeah.
They're not doing it through. What would you recommend that they do?
So the government did say that if we gave you any request for anything and we gave you 30 days or 60 days, we are going to be extending that to 90 days. So that was the initial announcements back in April when COVID really hit. And then what we would recommend that if you have an application and you've not even been able to comply with the 90-day period, or even whatever period that you were given on your letter, we recommend that you go on the IRCC web form and inform the government that you need a further extension of time, and you should have it. You shouldn't have a problem with this.
Right. So you're saying if they were given 30 days, let's say for argument's sakes, that 30 days finished in April 15th or something, they have another 90 days from April 15th to comply with whatever they were supposed to comply with. Is that correct?
90 days from the initial date that they would have issued the letter. So instead of 30 days, they had another 60 days
Right.
to complete that document.
Oh, I see. And if they were given 60 days, they get another 30 days.
So usually in the past, what they've done is they've given you 30 days. Since COVID hit, or in the last couple of months anyway, they give you an initial 90 days just right off the bat. If you can't comply within 90 days, then they say what they're going to do is send you a second letter automatically giving you 90 days. We're not really seeing that, or I'm not, Durriya. I'm not sure if you are. So just to make sure, you know, we're covered, we go on to the IRCC web forum and make sure that they know we're aware of their deadline. We haven't been able to comply, and we requested another 90 days. And the response that I typically get is, yeah, we know you didn't actually have to do this, but we're doing it anyway, just to make sure.
You do it anyway, yeah, that's fine.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
There is a lot of flexibility I see with the government on different types of matters, applications, and they're pretty lenient, I would say, about, you know, these deadlines and stuff, because they understand that none of this is in our hands anymore.
Yeah. Well, hopefully we'll all get out of this.
Yeah.
Yeah, hopefully we'll all get out of this pretty soon, and we'll all stay, you know, healthy and safe. And hopefully we won't see too many train wrecks from this, immigration train wrecks from this, this COVID, because typically the immigration situation, the immigration process is so bureaucratic and it's so unforgiving. If you miss one day, you can have a real problem. But right now, I think we can almost assume some flexibility. It's hard to know when the bureaucrats will turn that faucet off, you know, that tap off, and we will get back to the regular methods of processing and decision making. But for the time being, we should be okay. I just noticed that somebody just logged on. Looks like Chloe just logged on. I'm going to see if I can deal with this question quickly. Chloe says, sorry, I just logged on. If I want to get a study permit for the purpose of immigration, do I have to get into a Canadian study program that is directly related to my career right now? Say, for example, I'm a lawyer. Do I need to look for myself a law study program in Canada, or can I decide to look for another program, say medicine or other field of study. So let me deal with that if you don't mind, and the two of you can jump in. So typically when a study permit is assessed, you have to prove, you carry the burden of proving that you intend to come to Canada, that you're going to study the program that you are, that you've applied for, and that you're going to comply with all the conditions of the study permit that's issued to you, including the requirement to leave Canada if and when your status expires. So there's a couple of typical cases, okay? Sometimes we have a person who is a lawyer, let's suppose, or let's suppose who graduated from law school, and 20 years later they want to go to Canada to study, I don't know what, doesn't matter, something completely unrelated. They want to study Greek history, okay? So is there a law that says you cannot do that? The answer is obviously not. There's no requirement that one has to do with the other. What the reason that that application will probably be refused or could be refused is because the officer doesn't believe that you're really going to study Greek history 20 years later. They believe that you're just using the study permit in order to get to Canada and stay without status. Now let's suppose there's a different story. A person has a bachelor's degree or something and has been working for the last 10 or 15 years in a business. And they've been promoted, and now they're about to get some real responsibilities, you know, maybe an executive position or something, and they need an MBA, or they feel that an MBA is going to help them with their career path, okay? And let's suppose they're dealing with North American markets or something like that, and they apply 10 or 20 years later for an MBA. That's an application that could have a good chance of success because it makes sense. You can show that there is a logical reason, a logical progression, and it makes sense in your career to do that. Often we get people who apply, who come to us to apply for a study permit, which, you know, you're just scratching your head and you're saying, why is this person who all of a sudden at this stage in their life want to come with their husband or their spouse and, you know, 12 children or whatever, and they want to come to Canada to study, you know, Greek history or something, ancient Greek history. It makes no sense, and that's what you have to worry about. So typically if you're, you know, 18, 19, 20, you want to come to Canada to study at university, college here, probably no problem because it makes sense for a young person to study. But as we get older and as we move on with our lives, remember, you're giving up a job, presumably. Presumably, you're not going to be working in Canada except for up to 20 hours a week as authorized by study permits. So the officer is going to have some questions, Chloe. So you haven't indicated how old you are and why, for example, you want to switch your path. But the burden is on you to explain that. So when you fill out the form, don't just answer the questions that they're asking you. You know, what's your date of birth and what's your address and, you know, where have you been living and what's your passport number? You need to provide proof to the officer that this is making sense, that this makes economic sense. Because remember, you're going to be spending a lot of money on school in Canada. You're going to be giving up 2, 3, 4, 5 years of employment income. So explain to me how it makes sense. Explain to me how your plan makes sense. Durriya, Sandra, do you have any other comments on that?
I will just add a few comments. We actually come across the situation quite a lot, and
Right.
you understand that you know, a lot of persons who are overseas get difficulty with finding the right program or the right placement. We have that service as well in the firm. We do offer student placement services, so anybody who's interested can contact us for that. But you also have to understand that you've got to just like Guidy said, you know, I'm just trying to stress on what actually he said, because we know we suffer from this a lot with our clients. That if your program of study is not going to flow into a career path, you're going to have a problem not only with the study permit, but you're going to have a problem eventually, like, if you're trying to pursue permanent residence and all of that. It's going to be quite difficult to explain to officers how you manage to do such a huge career change. Plus, you also need to be aware of the fact that if you are coming from overseas and assuming that you do intend to pursue permanent residence with a study permit, after you finish your studies, you can't just get into any college or university. You've got to go into a publicly funded institution so that you can get the benefit of the postgraduate work permit. So there's a couple of technicalities that you have to be aware of when you're overseas and coming to Canada.
Sandra, do you have anything else for Chloe?
I do. So I agree with everything that Guidy and Durriya said. I have worked with many students in the past who are in a similar situation. 20 years after they've been in a career that's unsatisfying to them or whatever it is, and they'd like to change gears and change their career, and therefore need some education to tackle that. And I would say that if you can make it make sense, then you have a much better chance. And often what I see are people who want to make that leap to another career have been doing things throughout their life to do that. And so if we can document that, if we can show that you've been working towards that, even if it's in a volunteer capacity or a part-time capacity or something like that, if you sort of just ask yourself those questions, can I make this make sense? Then it's often something that we can write that narrative and sort of put that case forward to the IRCC. But you have to document it. It can't just be, this is what I've always wanted to do. You want to show that there's documentary evidence to support that.
Right. I just want to jump in here with one more question from Mika. Oh, actually, we just got a nice compliment from Chloe. So thank you, Chloe. If you need anything else, let me know. Mika asks a question. Can you describe your student placement services? So we only have about 3 minutes left to the session. So let me try to tackle that as quickly as possible. So I would describe two kind of placement services that we can offer you, okay? So you can have the student overseas who says, look, I'm interested in coming to Canada and I want to study law in Ontario, somewhere around Toronto. So someone like Sandra or any member of our staff can give you an idea. Look, there are a couple of law schools, 2 in Toronto or 3 in Toronto, one over here and one over there, and this is their reputations. Go to their websites and take a look and see which makes you happy. And then the idea would be that we would point you to the right direction. The other service that we provide from and Sandra delivers most of that service, is somebody who says, look, this is what I'm interested. I'd like you to go and help me get accepted and admitted to that school. You decide, give me 2 or 3 recommendations, and then I'll make a decision and you help me through that whole process. So we do that service. Of course, we charge a service fee for that. The benefit of doing that, coming to our law firm before you get a letter of acceptance, is to make sure that that makes sense, right? So if we had somebody like I just described who goes out and spends months getting into some school, they get a letter of acceptance and they come to us and say, here, Mr. Mamann, here's my letter of acceptance. I said, this doesn't make any sense to me. Why would you want to study at that school in that course? I don't know that I can get you a study permit. Well, you've just wasted your time. You've just wasted your time. And now it may be too late for you to get into a program which I actually think I can sell in terms of getting you a study permit. So I don't know that if you know that you're going to be hiring someone to do a study permit for you, please call that person and say, this is what I'm thinking of doing. I'm going to find my own program of study. What do you think? And so at least we give you a little bit of input before you launch and commit. So
Can I say one more thing, Guidy?
Yeah, sure.
So I 100% agree with Guidy, because when I do student placements for people, what we do is we start off with a very fulsome discussion about what their career and educational goals are. And you know, the idea is we're not just applying for a study placement, we're also thinking ahead to your study permit, and we're making sure that everything is linear and reasonable and makes a lot of sense. So I would just, you know, really emphasize what Guidy said is completely true.
Like, you know, you have to understand that the process of applying for permanent residence starts really at the very first second that you think about coming to Canada. Because if you apply for a study permit and it's refused, you've already complicated everything for us. Right? So try not to get ahead of yourself. Make sure that you're not wasting your time and your money and reducing your chances for success. So with that, I think we have now come to exactly 3 o'clock. Durriya has kindly posted our general email, info@migrationlaw.com. Please feel free to send your questions there, see if we can help you. And all of the changes, the COVID necessary changes to the study program and the CC are in a document. I have reposted the link to our Dropbox. Please help yourselves. You can feel free to circulate that Dropbox link and send it to your friends so that they'll have that information. Thank you all very much for attending, and let your friends know that this recording will be available on the internet through our social media channels. Thank you, Sandra, so much. Durriya, thank you so much. You guys have been great.
Thank you.
All the best. Be well. Bye-bye.